Good afternoon. The political party Rise Mzansi says it's appointed a group of experts to serve on what they call their independent candidate selection nominations committee. They say this group of people will decide who will represent the party in parliament and provincial legislatures. The group includes the former chair of the Electoral Commission Brigalia, Neeshan Balton from the Ahmed Kathrada Foundation, and the law professor Richard Calland from UCT. Boitumelo Mpakanyane is Rise Mzansi's head of internal democracy. Boitumelo, good afternoon to you. What is this committee going to do? How's this process going to work?
Hi, thank you. Thank you for having me, Stephen. So the nominations committee was appointed by a preeminent and reputable elections management company called the Elections Agency, and through them, the nominations committee was appointed to effectively do the work of assessing, adjudicating, and ultimately recommending our list of public representative candidates for the provincial legislatures as well as the National Assembly and NCOP. We opened up a very, very open public candidate nomination process where we allowed every single South African to contribute to deciding who Rise Mzansi sends to the National Assembly and sends to provincial legislatures. The reason we decided and we undertook our candidate selection process this way is because we understand that the many crises that plague South African society are ultimately informed by a crisis of leadership. And we decided that, South Africa's complex problems need new answers, and the only people who have the ability and skills to implement those answers are new leaders. We also decided that it's not enough to just have an independent candidate selection, open candidate selection process. We decided that it's also really, really important that we select the best minds in politics and governance across the civil society, across business, community-based organizations and the like, to do the work of assessing the capabilities of our public representative candidates. And that's effectively how the nominations committee came about. And like I said, they'll be doing the work of assessing the applications and nominations of our public representative candidates, while also interviewing them across two kind of technical assessments, just to make sure that the quality of public representative that Rise Mzansi ultimately deploys into the National Assembly is one of impeccable quality.
Are the people on the committee members of Rise Mzansi?
Not at all. So they are acting in a purely independent capacity, appointed by an independent service provider. So they're not members of Rise Mzansi at all. They are just South Africans, I guess, with a passion for governance and ensuring that South African political systems and governance systems function as optimally as possible. And to that effect, the elections agency constituted the nominations committee to effectively assist them in their work of adjudicating our public representatives. But it's also in keeping with Rise Mzansi's kind of organizational ethic of subjecting our processes and thinking.
Boitumelo, the elections are still some time away. There'll be plenty more time to electioneer, I promise you.
Sure.
If someone is nominated to be a member of parliament, does this group have the final say? Are you giving the final say over who represents you to a group of people who aren't members of your party?
So the nominations committee will be responsible for providing us with the preliminary ranking of candidates. And this will be determined by, like I said, those two objective assessments. Rise Mzansi ultimately has the political responsibility of making sure that our candidate lists are representative from a gender perspective, have an adequate skills mix, and have a sufficient degree of youth representation as well as a sufficient degree of experience. So they don't have the final say, but the ability to adjust is for Rise Mzansi. Rise Mzansi's NLC's ability to adjust the candidate list is also quite minimal, only being able to adjust about 20% of the final list. So it's not the final say, but our adjustment kind of powers are also limited.
Okay, so if the committee decides that your leader Songezo Zibi should be disqualified because journalists are always bad politicians, and he was once a journalist, for example, but if they decide that your leader cannot stand for parliament, that you could still override that decision.
We actually couldn't. So the committee's job is actually to assess our candidates against a strict eligibility criteria, and any candidate that doesn't meet that eligibility criteria loses consideration in the selection process. So if the committee does decide that a specific candidate, whether it's Songezo Zibi or myself or our chairperson Vuso Ramohopa, doesn't meet the minimum criteria, then they wouldn't enjoy consideration for Parliament or for any legislature.
Isn't that giving an awful lot of power, like a huge amount of power, to a group of people who aren't even members of your party?
It definitely is, but we're also alive to the realities that, the people that would ultimately be deploying into the National Assembly wouldn't just be representatives of Rise Mzansi supporters and members, but also this is kind of symbolic of the advocacy work that Rise Mzansi has been doing to achieve electoral reform. Rise Mzansi is a big proponent and believes very, very strongly in the need to achieve meaningful electoral reform and to shorten the distance between the citizen on the ground and their public representative. I'm willing to bet that none of your viewers, I certainly don't myself, know who their public representatives are, and that's what the process kind of exists to try and achieve, is a kind of overlaying of constituency governance onto the kind of proportional representation realities that we have in the organization. But ultimately, it's Rise Mzansi's commitment to ethical, principled, and capable leadership.
So all of that may be the case, and I can imagine the arguments about it. I don't know, though, if you can really argue it's democratic. You have members. Those members may elect a person. Let's just continue with the Songezo Zibi answer, because he's leader at the moment. They may elect him as leader. They would expect that he would be leader in Parliament. I mean, that's kind of the point. So, I mean, you're taking... I mean, it's a complicated thing, Boitumelo, don't get me wrong. I mean, different political parties do different things and for different reasons. But I don't know if what you're going to do is very democratic. It's taking a lot of power away from your members.
So our members will have an opportunity to participate very, very meaningfully in the endorsements and objections process. So all the candidates who go through the process are going to have to be subjected to an endorsement process among our members, where they have to achieve 1,000 endorsements from that group and from that base. What then happens then is we also subject our candidates to an objections process, where our members will have an opportunity to object to our candidates. But I think it's also important, Stephen, to place into context that Rise Mzansi's leadership team is an inaugural structure, and because of that, we ourselves are an unelected inaugural body. It wouldn't be practical to hold elections before you found a political party, and we decided the best way to go about selecting our public representatives while staying true to the promise that we made to South Africans, that we will make sure at all times that the best among us must lead, is also to attract talent from outside Rise Mzansi and subject them to the expertise of people who have notable credentials in governance and political governance specifically.
Okay, so let me sort of tackle this problem from another way. Is that many members of Parliament, you say we don't know who represents us in a constituency level, and I think that's true. I don't. Most people don't. In fact, I don't know anyone who does. But there's another element to this, right? Which if you take, for example, the Democratic Alliance and the ANC, is that those members of Parliament often have their own constituency. They may not have a geographic constituency, but they have a group of people that they represent. Sometimes it's a group of people who support them. Sometimes it's a group of people who've elected them for a particular reason. Sometimes it's a group of people who, they speak the same language. Whatever it is, they have a constituency. And you are removing that constituency. We mustn't always think of constituencies as geographic. What I'm trying to say is there's a reason that politics works in the way that it does in most democracies, and you may be messing with that a little bit.
That is quite literally the point and intention, Steve. And you've got political parties that are supposed to do constituency work on Mondays, and they hold national leadership meetings on Mondays, and ultimately just don't invest in the work of doing constituency work. But to your point around how constituencies aren't just geographic, they're psychographic as well. We're alive to this, and one of the things that we subject Rise Mzansi, applicants to is giving us a sense of whose interests they would be representing when they go to Parliament, and this is part of the assessment criteria. So we definitely haven't made the assumption that constituencies are purely demographic. We are alive to the reality that they're psychographic as well. But the intention is specifically to disrupt how we have come to conceive of constituency work, specifically in our legislatures, because ultimately the work from the constituency and public participation work isn't done. And that's the reason that South Africans don't know who their public representatives are.
Thank you very much indeed, Boitumelo. Really do appreciate the time. It's an interesting conversation. We could go on for some time on this. Boitumelo Mpakanyane is the head of internal democracy at Rise Mzansi.